Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Gogh Miner, aka, again, Van Goghy, if you like her nickname that she got from NA. Van Gogh is obviously a beloved character by many people. She's a very cute character, very bubbly at times. In fact, I was talking with Trubs about this character in particular, and he was telling me how, like, it's basically because of her big fat mouth that we keep getting into trouble in the current event on JP. But this version of Van Gogh is going to be basically an AoE quick Lancer welfare. She's going to be the newest welfare from the Mystery House event on JP, and she's definitely an interesting one. I think a lot of people are going to like her just because of the character aspect, but we're going to try to give you guys the best sort of breakdown on her actual kit and where I think she can actually be strong. So again, with the fact that she is a welfare, obviously this means you got to do the event or you're going to have probably a long time before you see her. Again, we don't know when events will rerun on NA or JP for that matter. So we're kind of just in a little bit of a limbo until they kind of change how they're handling things. But this has been pretty much par for the course now for well over a year at this point with regards to reruns. There is the Evocation Festival. For those of you guys that are unaware of that, this is the process by which we can reacquire old welfares, but units are slow to get added to that nowadays, again, as they kind of have gotten the majority of them in there. So I'm guessing that they're trying to keep the pace slow a little bit due to FOMO reasons and not wanting to make it so you can instantaneously just get any unit that you miss. They're trying to kind of keep it so that not every unit is in there at any given moment. And so, again, you will have a potential path to getting Van Gogh should you miss her, but we have no idea how long that will take, at least as of the recording point of this video. Now, again, with her being a 4-star and a welfare, you're guaranteed to get the 5 copies of her if you play the event. That means an NP5 unit for you. It means she's going to punch decently hard, basically at an SSR's level. Definitely a really nice thing with regards to any welfare, and one of the reasons why everybody should kind of strive to get them. Taking a look here at her raw stats, you guys can see she basically is going to end up with about 9.2k attack. This is not the highest, but it's still in that 9k range. It's usually what I like to see on a 4-star, so I'm going to say that's perfectly fine. There's no issues there. Her HP value is about 12k. This is maybe not the best, but again, it still should be pretty adequate for a 4-star, and again, nothing too much to worry about. Her attribute here is going to be Man. She has a star absorption of only 89. This is, again, not very high, but given the fact she's a quick unit, stars should abound a little bit, so you should be okay there. Her star generation rate is 11.7, so not too shabby there either. Her NP charge rate's actually pretty high at 0.72%. Keep in mind she's a quick unit, though. Quick units often struggle with refund. Van Gogh is going to be kind of one of those in-between units. She will refund quite adequately, but it may not be, again, you know, the best amount. It may not be that 50% or something like that, like you're hoping for. It's instead going to be somewhere more around probably the 30% range on that, and we'll talk about that as we get to the actual refund numbers. Her NP charge defense is about 4% for taking a hit. So again, that's per attack per hit. And then her death rate is at 28%, a little bit higher than the average there. Her alignment is chaotic and balanced. Again, chaotic, there's plenty of stuff that you can synergize with this and exploit against, but balanced, there's not a whole lot going on there. Gender for her is going to be female. She is considered a child servant as a basic trait. She is existence outside the domain, a holdover from her foreigner form. She is a hominide servant, a humanoid, a normal servant, a 7-night servant, a threat to humanity, again, another holdover from her foreigner form, and weak to intima elish. Looking at the deck here, you guys can see it is the standard Lancer deck, but this is also the deck that we kind of like to see for quick units nowadays as we've come into the Summer Scotty system where, again, you may be running multiple variants of Scotties, but at least you'll certainly have a lot of quick up helping out those quick cards performance, and she's got 6 hit counts on each of those, so really stellar hit counts for that. And then sometimes as well, you may want to be able to crit, and the Buster crit that Summer Scotty can provide provide will allow your Buster cards to pop off as well. Again, that only having a 3-hit count, but really the Buster card's usually the one we don't care too much about the hit counts for. And the Arts card here at least is a 3-hit Arts card, so right on average. Maybe we would hope for a little bit better performance in that regard since there's only one of it, but do keep in mind that her base MP charge attack rate is that 0.72 like we mentioned before, so she should be okay with that in mind. Her extra attack is only going to be the 5 hits, but again, that is average as well, so nothing too much to be concerned about with that. Looking at her first skill here, you guys can see it can only be used when there are 10 critical stars or more, and this will actually drain the crit stars when you use it. Unfortunately, I have to point this out and call it out for what it is. This is sort of an old reductive take on star skills, star consumption skills. This is the way some of the initial star consumption skills worked in the game. Usually we don't see this too much anymore. Usually instead we see you just have to meet the star count and then it doesn't actually consume the stars. But we have started to see a shift back towards this as, again, pretty much since Kukulkan, a lot of units actually consuming the stars in order to gain some sort of benefit, I think, has come back into play as sort of Lasengel has realized that stars are kind of just everywhere nowadays in a lot of the comps. So they are, again, doing this to her. It's not the best of circumstances, but ultimately it's something you should easily be able to deal with in most circumstances, especially if you're running a Summer Scotty. She does at least have a Star Bomb on her 3rd skill, so certainly a nice thing in that regard. Basically what this skill is going to allow you to do, it's going to allow you to select one of 3 different, party-wide card performance buffs, each for 3 turns, each up to 20%. You can't get all of them at the same time, but you can certainly at least kind of get one of them. You could potentially have the ability as well, if you were starting to kind of mess with cooldown reductions and such, to get this back in some way, shape, or form, but that's going to require you to use some sort of odd structured comp in order to do that, not your standard conventional like double Scotty or triple Scotty type of setup. So again, it is up to you to determine how you want to structure things for Van Gogh. It may be worth it in your eyes, especially if you're trying to get somebody else to have a little bit more charge, but ultimately, or not charge, card performance, but ultimately at the end of the day, you're just probably going to get this the one time. So my advice would be, especially in her case, to probably select the quick up. Again, this is going to benefit not only her carding, but also her NP. And then on top of that, it's also going to increase the party's NP generation rate for 3 turns of, again, up to 20%. So nothing too amazing, but we've actually talked about this before, the relationship between NP gain and NP rate that the buff can provide and quick units. A lot of the time, your arts units, it's nice for them to get it. They obviously pop off quite a bit, but quick units really seem to feel that NP gain rate adjustment, partially due to the fact that they have naturally lower NP gain than something like the arts cards do. So again, a really nice thing that she has. This does help out her NP refund. All of this on a 4-turn cooldown, as we mentioned before, making it relatively low and something that you'll be able to get back to relatively fast if you've lowered the skill. Her active skills here for number 2, we're going to have basically an increase to her own HP. This is kind of why I said the HP value at the beginning wasn't the biggest of concerns, because again, you have basically a self-heal of 3,000. The cool part with max HP is you can kind of just use it whenever and it won't be wasted. So again, if you have to pop this turn 1, even when she hasn't expended any of her health, this is immediately just going to add 3,000 health to her. So certainly the 12k health value will bump up to 15k. That'll definitely be really nice. And again, with this being on a 6-turn cooldown, it's not going to be forever until you see it again, so it's not the worst of things. But the real thing that a lot of people are going to want to lower the skill for is going to be the fact that she gets 30% charge based off of this. So this combined with something like her mana loading maxed out, that's going to give you another 20% charge. So you'll end up with a nice calm, like 50% right there, potentially on turn 1. It's going to be great for something like the Scotty system, as again, it really likes to operate in increments of 50. So certainly a nice thing that she has the charge skill here. On top of that, she's going to gain critical stars. Again, this scales from 10 all the way up to 20. So the more you level the skill, the more you're going to get. If you have it lured, nice 20 star bomb right there, again, to help you out, say, for the first skill. So not the hugest of concerns, as we already mentioned. You have multiple sources of it potentially in a Scotty comp at this point. So again, a really nice thing. On top of that, she will also gain 10 additional critical stars on a city battlefield. This is an interesting thing because this is her only real interaction with the city battlefield. She does, on her NP, have the ability to set the battlefield to be city. It is, however, a weird thing given the fact that you would need to have already NP'd or be on a city field already for you to be able to take advantage of these extra 10 critical stars because of that. But it is what it is. And again, you don't have to worry about it too much. Usually you have plenty of stars to go around in a quick comp. Now, moving on to her third skill, you can see she gets a little bit more survivability in here, granting herself evasion for 2 attacks, 3 turns. This is certainly welcome. It's a hard survival skill, something that's going to allow her to invalidate damage. So, for instance, something like an NP headed her way or something like that. This is going to be really nice in combination with that max HP up from the second skill. You now have a hard survival skill. This is going to make Van Gogh, even though at first she seemed like she maybe had a little bit low HP, into a rather solid and tanky character. Certainly not going to be able to survive everything, but it is a good amount of self-preservation really to have there. On top of that, she's also going to increase her own critical attack chance resistance for 3 turns, scales up to 30%. It's up to you if you want to lure this skill for, like, say, the cooldown and getting back to the self-evasion. You certainly can if you want to. If you're going to be using her as more of a challenge unit, that is, again, your prerogative. But I would probably say you don't have to in most circumstances. Still, 30% critical chance resistance is a hefty amount, particularly against certain NPCs. This may totally invalidate their ability to crit, or it may cut into, again, their critical capability if they are trying to stack crit chance. So definitely a nice thing for her to have. It's just going to mean that, again, her health is going to go a little bit further as she's not going to get crit down nearly as much. Basically, for her passive skills now, moving on, you can see she gets Buster Performance up of 4%. This, again, just for those 2 Buster cards. It's also going to increase the critical star generation rate of her Buster cards by 30%. It's actually decently sizable, and this is why, normally I say the hit counts for your Buster cards aren't too big of a deal, because hit counts usually impact, again, NP generation, of which the Buster card is the least, and star generation, of which the Buster card is the second highest. So not the highest, because that belongs to Quick, but it is the second highest. This bumping that up by 30% certainly help out the performance of those Buster cards. So the fact she has at least 3 hit counts on them, not a bad sign. And again, certainly something that will help out the performance of that card overall. Existence outside the domain is, again, the foreigner trait. She has a D rank of it, but she's still going to get 2 stars every single turn. So even more kind of to include into this quick unit's composition. And then increase her own debuff resistance by 4%. Nothing too much to write home about there. And then self-portrait as a sunflower as a unique passive skill here. Increasing her own mental debuff resistance by 30%. So this can definitely be sizable. Can help stop some of the nastier charm and terror-like effects. So definitely a nice thing in that regard. Certainly not going to make her immune to them or anything like that, but having 30% extra is very, very good. Looking at her Append skills now. Again, I already recommended to you guys get the mana loading. It's going to pair really nicely with that 30% charge skill. So that's going to be my recommendation for your first one. But since this is welfare and you should get all the coins that you need by virtue of the shop and bonding the unit, there's some other stuff we can do here, particularly the third Append, which for once is actually a good one, as she has anti-berserker attack damage aptitude. It's a really, really nice one to have on a welfare where, again, like I said, you're guaranteed to have the coins. This is just pretty much a freebie. You can definitely unlock this at minimum, even if you choose not to level it up, and she will, just for unlocking it, get 20% extra damage to berserkers. So certainly a really good one, and probably the second one I would go after. With regards to her 4th skill, this one can also be good. Same thing with the extra attack finesse. The 5th skill could be good if you're using her in more of that challenge environment, but again, not really got a whole bunch of applications, given the fact that she is a quick-oriented unit and probably not somebody likely to be used in a cooldown-oriented scheme. It's up to you. You can certainly use it if you feel like you'll get mileage out of it, but my advice would probably be to focus on the second and third, and then maybe something like the fourth to get that extra little bit of crit damage. But again, totally your prerogative as to which to go to next. Looking at her Noble Phantasm now, you guys can see she has a 4-hit AoE quick MP. Again, not stellar hit count here, but given the fact that she has 30% charge, she has, quick up potentially in her kit and NP gain in her kit. This actually does go kind of the distance a little bit here. So you can see it basically is going to deal damage to all enemies. It's going to deal super effective damage to lawful alignment enemies. Again, super effective means that it is multiplicative with every other source of buffing. So this is really nice. That's what you want. You want multiplicative, not additive. Multiplicative means that it'll get stronger than the sum of its parts, basically. So again, the fact that super effective modifiers are always multiplicative is really, really good. Don't confuse this with a power mod. Those can sometimes appear on NPs, but again, this is a really, really nice thing for it to have. Lawful alignment's not a super common niche, but there are quite a few units out there that have it, including another unit of the Lancer Core there. Lalter now has it as part of one of her skills, but admittedly, that is just a power mod compared to Van Gogh's super effective modifier here. She does have a 40% chance to stun them. This is not the best. Again, I'm not a huge fan of having really low percentile stun chances. One thing, if you had like 60, 70%, at least that would be happening reasonably often. But at 40%, this is so low that you're going to go like, hey, I never know if this is going to land or not. So like, I just kind of have to assume that it won't. So don't count on it. Don't rely on it. If it does happen, it happens. Again, it may save you an enemy's rebuttal to any of your attacks if it does go off. But my advice is when it's such a low percentage, just don't rely on it. And you should be fine as long as you do that. Interestingly enough, again, as we mentioned before, her NP will add city battlefield status to the field for 5 turns. There's a little bit of key language in here. Add city battlefield status to the field, basically. This is going to function like Arcuid's Millennium Castle battlefield. It's going to go up in the upper right. You can see Fandom's nodes on it, basically indicating that it's active. Tapping on it will also show the duration, so it's not going to be on Van Gogh herself. It's going to be up in the upper right. It's going to be independent of her because of that. And then because of that, it cannot be removed because it's not attached to her. It's stackable if you use the NP in successive alternate turns. Unfortunately, this will probably not have any real benefit, but it's there. It just begins another buff cycle. So it's not like it's a unique buff. And basically once it's up, it has the 3-turn duration or whatever, 5-turn duration in this case, and then it'll fall off. Essentially, every single time you NP, this will start a new 5-turn timer. So definitely nice in that regard. It is removed if she is defeated, though, so be careful. You can lose it, though. That being said, there is maybe some synergy with other units that can pop off on city battlefield, like Umu, but ultimately, at the end of the day, there's not a whole lot of actual like card type synergy there, so don't worry about it too much. Maybe there'll be more synergies in the future. Still, it's an interesting addition, especially as a new field buff being added. Her overcharge effect increases her own NP damage, activating first. It is only for 1 turn, so you're not going to be able to stack this, but this is nice, at least that it's a base 20% modifier. And again, if you combine this with someone like Oberon, he can double up any source of NP damage, so his 20% can basically turn into functionally 40% for him. So really a nice sort of setup there. Let's go ahead now, though, and let's talk about refund scenarios. So essentially with 2 times Summer Scotty against archers or neutral targets, we're going to be looking at essentially at 0 out of a possible 12 overkill hits for 3 enemies. We're going to be looking at essentially 26% refund. This is not a good number. However, if we can get this up to even 3 out of 12 overkill hits, aka you have basically killed each of the 3 enemies, because you will get 1 hit of overkill just for that. If you do that, you will reach the 30% breakpoint with a double Summer Scotty. So again, this is kind of perfect in line with that. Basically, Van Gogh should be able to easily reach that nice 30% breakpoint. It's not going to be the 50% like you hope for a lot of the times in the Scotty system, but 30% is not a bad number either, since there's a couple of units out there that can provide an additional 20% at times, including units like Oberon. Essentially, the max amount of refund you could get there would be roughly 39%. So you're not going to be able to like get to 50 or something like that. There is a like kind of max cap basically due to the amount of hit counts. And that's assuming 12 out of 12 overkill hits, which you'll probably never get. If we start to use triple Scotty, though, we reach the breakpoint from even 0 out of 12, as that will be 31%. So that is something that you can do, but keep in mind there is a trade-off there. Usually, triple Scotty is better refund, but worse damage than using an Oberon. So using double Scotty and an Oberon is going to result in a little bit more damage. Since we can kind of hit that a little bit more easily, it's probably going to be what we're going to want to do is go with the Oberon variant in most scenarios. As we take a look at that, we can kind of now look at essentially the charge scenarios. So talking about this is Van Gogh in a 3/3x neutral node. For any of you guys that are unfamiliar, this usually means 3 enemies in the first wave, 3 enemies in the second wave, and any number of enemies in the third wave, because we don't care. And basically, this just, again, being neutral just means that there's not, again, additional sources of NP generation based off the unit type that you're hitting. Your knight classes are normally just pure neutral in that regard, so it is what it is. But you can see no overkill hits really required for that amount, because you kind of got to kill the node, or kind of kill the wave in order to advance. So as long as it's 3 enemy waves, should be perfectly fine. And you can see, basically starting her out with a 50% C, we can basically lead off with one of the Scotties right there at 50%. Basically pop both Scotties, bust, but give the one 50% charge. That'll raise you up to 100% charge, fire off the NP. Should refund about 29% dead on right there. And again, from there, you're just going to do the remaining Scotty 50%, the basically the Oberon 20%. That's going to bring you up to full. Again, fire off the NP one more time. And in order to get back to full for the final NP, basically we use Oberon's remaining charge skill and Van Gogh's own 30% charge skill from the second skill there. So perfectly kind of balanced as it should be. So again, really easy for you to do. You can also, depending on how you want to approach it, kind of delay the Scotty NP. That should also reasonably be possible. But, or sorry, not NP, but charge. But it's totally up to you and kind of the order of operations that you want to do this in. You can kind of mix and match it some, just depending on what your goals are. Talking about craft essences, then with that in mind, we're probably going to want a nice 50% C. Something like Sweet Crystal is going to be ideal if you want Invuln Pierce. This is going to be something that you can find and purchase in the shop. As we already mentioned, it is all attack scaling. And again, this is a really, really nice one to have. However, just keep in mind that it is 5 rare prisms per copy for a total of 25 rare prisms in order to MLB this sucker. But again, this is a permanently available CE due to the shop, so you can get it whenever you want. It is fantastic. It is worth the cost, but it may not be something that you want to purchase right away, depending on your other needs. If you are somehow managing to start from 0, Black Grail is going to be your Huckleberry here. It literally is just the highest offensive CE in the game at the current moment in time. If you're lucky enough to have it at MLB, it scales up to 24,000, or sorry, 2,400 attack. But keep in mind that she is not a unit that can just normally start from 0, so you're only going to want to use this in scenarios where maybe it's like 2 waves or maybe just a one-shot type deal. But this is something that you could certainly do. Something like Traces of Christmas can be helpful if you guys find yourself in any sort of scenario where maybe the 50% charge she is not enough due to maybe you're facing things like Berserkers or something like that just naturally have a little bit lower refund. Something like Traces of Christmas can help offset that type of issue. And again, it's up to you to determine how you want to handle that sort of scenario. But this is a really good one. It is an old Lotto C, so most of you guys should have it if you were around back then. If not, any 50% C should work. Your main goals are going to be, again, 50% charge, all attack scaling. As long as it has that and some sort of offensive firepower to add to her, you can definitely rest assured that it'll probably be good. Doesn't have to even be a quick C. Again, for a lot of our circumstances, as you'll see, we sometimes plot out cranking even on a quick unit due to the fact that cranking is 15% NP damage, 50% starting charge, all attack, and basically, regardless of the buster component, is at least a decent chunk of damage being provided. So it's totally up to you to determine if that's the one you want to go after. There are other CEs, for instance, in the JP shop, like Holy Night Supper and such, that are just permanently available. But again, that's basically going to be the charging components that we're going to recommend for her. Let's take a look now at Van Gogh's actual just raw numbers. So this is Van Gogh only with her own buffs in a neutral damage environment. So again, nothing class effective. And we're not including any sort of external buffs from things like support characters, mystic codes, craft essences, none of that. So basically just Van Gogh under her own power in a neutral scenario. You guys can see, again, we can pretty much just skip right down to the NP5 numbers here and look at these because she should be NP5 for you guys as welfare. So you're looking at about 28.5k there just for normal damage. And if you do happen to have the lawful super effective, you're up at 42k. So almost 43. So that's going to be where you're really going to want to try and use her. That's where Van Gogh should stand out a little bit more. Again, given the fact that there are other units out there that do have lawful niche, it's up to you to determine if she's going to be your best choice. But with her being a welfare, really shouldn't lick the gift horse in the mouth in that regard. Taking a look at her proper damage now in an actual comp, this is still neutral damage, but this is now including things like mystic codes, craft essences, and support characters. You can see 2 times Summer Scotty, Oberon, a level 100 cranking, as we mentioned, because it's just a decent damage CE for 50% charge, and then a level 10 maxed out Neo plug suit. You can see here, obviously low numbers to begin with due to having the Oberon in there, but by wave 3, the numbers do get a considerable spike, nearly doubling. And remember, if you're actually in an effective scenario, these numbers will be double of what is already shown on the screen. Now, given the fact that there is the lawful niche, however, we can also get even more firepower out of this. And again, definitely a solid damage performance there. However, we kind of gotta compare to some of the other Lancers at this point. So taking a look here at Bradamante, she's another AoE quick Lancer. She is permanent. She is an SSR. So again, you're comparing an SSR to a welfare, but it is a reasonably fair comparison since the welfare is guaranteed in P5. Taking a look at this, 2 times Summer Scotty with a normal Scotty and a Black Grail is going to be kind of her best scenario. So not really getting the firepower of Oberon. This is why the NP1 numbers are going to look a little bit worse here. You can see it's still better than basically the raw numbers for Van Gogh there at NP5, but the Earth modifier in here is definitely going to be a really nice one as well, getting up to 324k there, even at just NP1. However, lawful will win out. So even though Bradamante has had some love here in terms of upgrades, you can still see that it would basically take NP2 before you'd outpace. So in a neutral environment, Bradamante would win at NP1, but the second any of the niches come into play, basically at that point, then Van Gogh is going to beat her out. Burrito Mart has recently just gotten a very timely buff here as well, which is kind of funny given the fact that Van Gogh came out with this event. It almost feels like they tried to immediately one-up to make Burrito Mart worth, but again, you can see NP1 numbers looking really solid there at 366k. And then writing niche starts to bump it up to 417k in comparison. So already just with one of her niches, she is beating Van Gogh's maximum potential right there. So Bredamart in a much, much better scenario right here. And this doesn't even include things like the writer niche. And again, even more there for both. Now, do keep in mind, writer niche would obviously be these actual numbers since it is true neutral. Whereas if you're hitting something that's, say, an archer and writing, these numbers would get doubled. So, for instance, in that scenario, you might actually be able to hit 550k here against a writer, but ultimately, at the end of the day, you could look at something like this and say, if you were somehow able to instead hit a archer, you would be able to double these numbers and potentially do more. Again, it's highly unlikely that's ever going to be the case. It would have to be a scenario where there's maybe like 2 high health enemies or something like that. And I'm going to say at that point, then the circumstances would probably favor Breedomart even still. So it is what it is. It's kind of difficult to compare the apples to the oranges at that point. And then there is the capacity to have both niches in play, which makes Breedomart pop off even harder. As we mentioned before, Lalter is another unit. You can see she has a rather long sheet. This is just due to the complexity of Lalter, as she has power mods aplenty, has double Oberon as her ideal comp, and has to use a K-scope at the moment, basically. Actually, I think you could start her out with a 60% CE, but it's basically going to require you to have a lot of stuff. So again, you might be able to stretch it some depending on what you have, but it is what it is. Either way, again, you can see rough numbers there at MP1, not looking so hot. Lalter is a story-locked unit, so even though she's 4-star, you're not going to be guaranteed to get MP5. But certainly, if you do have MP5, just for comparison's sake here, you can see 312 there is going to be your raw number, and then the power mods are really just going to kind of help things get even more skewed. So what you can see, though, here is that Van Gogh is going to kind of outpace her as long as Van Gogh does have her mods in play. It just kind of depends on the situation that you're in. So Lalter kind of been a damage king for a long time amongst the 4-stars, but certainly there are other options out there. The Valkyries are going to be another 4-star. This is not the welfare version of them. This is their normal Lancer version that's also a permanent unit. But you can see, certainly at MP1, look at a little bit more spicy, but at MP5, they get a little bit better. Honestly, though, the Valkyries definitely in need of an upgrade, as they are kind of hard left behind. They don't have a niche to call their own, and they don't really have the firepower anymore to hang. Parvati, on the other hand, here is another really good unit. Do keep in mind, though, that Parvati's numbers kind of are going to be skewed a little bit by having sort of a one-turn power, or sorry, not power mod, a one-turn like buff that's going to allow her to get a little bit more firepower on turn 3. This is why the wave 1 and wave 2 numbers look a little bit anemic, and then wave 3 really pops off. Again, she can actually touch Black Grail, though, due to her really good refund, so she's in a much better scenario. And this is why NP5 Parvati certainly doing quite well and still pumping really solid numbers. So again, it's the Valkyries there. They're the ones that are really left behind. So to me, this is what you guys really need to focus on with Van Gogh, is not, is Van Gogh going to be the strongest unit? She's not necessarily. You just need to try and convince yourself again that she is a welfare. She's free. You don't have to worry too much about her as a result of that. She should be easy to level up, easy to get online. And really, the situations that you should be looking for using her are going to be those lawful scenarios. That's where she'll be really nice. Though I do think she can do some interesting stuff in a challenge environment. She has quite a bit of things in her kit. Her kit overall is not a bad one. So let me know what you guys think about Van Gogh, how you guys see yourself using her. And again, would you like to see Van Gogh get a costume, and what should that be? I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate all the support as always. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys for the next video.